but you've also got different adjustment levels for the standard regen as well. This is the new MG4 Urban. It's basically the next generation MG4 in some markets, but in Australia we're overlapping. We've got the existing MG4, which is rear-wheel drive based or all-wheel drive, whereas this is front-wheel drive only. It's packaged for, as the name suggests, urban environments. For this test, I'm part of the launch event. We're just going to go for a bit of a preview drive around Sydney. I don't think it's very far, but it'll give us a bit of a taste of what this thing is like. Now, this interior is, you can tell, it's been packaged for optimum space efficiency. Like, you've got tubs underneath the center console there, plenty of storage around the main console, big bucket in the middle, with decent headroom and legroom in the front and back. I've also got excellent visibility here. I can see over that side mirror very easily. You've got a little quarter window there just in case there's something hidden behind. And yeah, great view all out the front. The windscreen is quite close. I feel like I could almost see down to the floor. Like, I can't see the bonnet, but I can just see straight down over the edge. Out the back, the view is a bit tighter. The rear windscreen is pretty confined. You've got chunky pillars as well because it is a compact vehicle, but you do have a comprehensive surround view camera system. You've actually got different camera angles you can look from, although I can't seem to find a way to spin around the car like you can in some systems. There are two variants on sale in Australia, including a 43 kilowatt hour version and 54 kilowatt hour version. They both come with the same specifications. I'll flash up the spec sheet now so you can have a bit of a look at that. But yeah, very comprehensively equipped actually, although it does come with a 6-speaker stereo, which I think is a bit basic. But this is a cheaper end vehicle. You can't expect, you know, a 22-speaker Bowers and Wilkins thing. But it means both variants get the dual screens on the dashboard. I like the way it's just got a little instrument cluster there. It's got all the vital information, nothing more, nothing less. It doesn't take up my view or anything like that. And then you've got the main 12.8-inch screen here. I am running Android Auto with this one. It's wireless as well. You've got a drop-down menu here so you can turn up the brightness very quickly. You've got some jump to options as well. But it is great to see you've got a separate panel down here with physical controls. This was brought in based on customer feedback, and you do actually have a volume knob, but you've got climate controls, turn the fan speed up and down, or turn the change around the different air vent controls. Decent fit and finish around here. We've got this kind of soft fake leather across the dash, bit of color there, metallic trimmings, I quite like that. This example is actually showcasing a prototype color scheme, so you can't actually buy this right now, but they're just testing the waters, so to speak, just to see what people think. It's got this discreet orange stitching and then light gray seats with slightly darker sections on the outside. Just sort of brightens up the interior, makes it feel a bit more luxurious. I think it's a decent move, at least have it as an option, as long as it's not too expensive. Then up at the back, nice flat floor, heaps of leg room, especially for this vehicle category. Even headroom is good because it's got a bit of an upright cabin orientation. And then boot space, impressive again, almost 400 litres, which is excellent for this size vehicle. You've actually got 98 litres under the floor as well, which is actually pretty big. You could put some shopping down there. It's not just for the charging cables. And of course you can flip down the rear seats and it opens up about 1250 litres. Power in the top spec model that I'm driving here comes from a 54 kilowatt hour battery providing a range of around 400 kilometres, and that feeds energy to a front mounted electric motor producing 118 kilowatts and 250 newton meters. MG claims 0 to 100 in 8.7 seconds. So obviously this is made for urban environments, and yeah, that visibility I think is the biggest takeaway in suiting in urban environments. Like, I feel like I'm almost walking out here like everybody else. I can just see exactly what's going on. There's no intimidation here. I feel like I could park it in a very tight and difficult situation quite easily because I've got that great perception of what's going on outside. Now obviously, being an electric vehicle, it is very quiet, so you've got that sort of luxury element, which is, you know, a bit of a step up over a petrol or diesel equivalent in this size vehicle. You can just hear a bit of a whine happening. Got the speed limit warning system buzzing at me. Does look like we've got a driver monitoring camera down there as well, so we'll see how that reacts. I'll leave everything on for this test drive. As I said, it's just a short preview drive, so yeah, I'll leave everything on and just see how it actually behaves. Yeah, fit and finish seems pretty good. I mean, I know it's a cheap vehicle, you kind of get that sense, but they have tried hard to, yeah, as I said, mix up the trims just to make it feel a little bit more luxurious, a little bit more special than a typical, you know, rental spec vehicle. Interestingly, to help with packaging and space efficiency and all of that, you're gonna have to watch out for these cyclists. I'm gonna cut across. Ready, set, now. Oh, missed him. Bonus points getting two at once. Interestingly, this does feature a torsion beam rear end, and I think I'm right in saying this is one of, I won't say the only, because there's always one that sneaks through, but one of the only EVs on the market right now that has a torsion beam rear end. Now, why is that important? Well, torsion beam is a pretty basic and crude sort of suspension setup, but it is you know, totally okay for a small lightweight vehicle, because you don't need a comprehensive setup. It ends up adding weight and taking up room. But with an electric vehicle, they tend to be quite heavy. This weighs around 1,500 kilograms, depending on the battery size, but 1,520 I think is the max that it weighs, which is very light for an EV, but still quite heavy for a small little hatchback. I mean, 1,300 kilograms or even 1,400 kilograms for a modern hatchback of this size with a petrol engine is, you know, pretty normal. But 100 kilograms heavier, it's not that much of a big deal, I guess. The power to weight ratio is around 75 kilowatts per ton, which is around the same as a Ford Ranger, or, you know, even a base spec Toyota Hilux or something like that. Not cracking performance, but enough to get you by and zip around the city. Handles pretty good around the streets. Feels together, it doesn't feel too sloppy going over some of these speed bumps. Yeah, reasonably comfortable. Sometimes these modern EVs are either too firm or just way too soft. This feels pretty good. Got lots of beeps and bongs happening here. I keep going over the speed limit, I guess. It's 40 it says, but yeah, again, that visibility, I can just see straight over that side windowsill easily. It just makes me feel very comfortable and yeah, not intimidated at all while I'm driving along, even in a tight city environment. So that's one of the problems with these speed recognition systems. It's saying it's 25 now, where I know it's 40. It says 40 right there, it says 40 on Google Maps. Now it's saying 50 when clearly it's 40. So it gets it wrong, but then it's, yeah, beeping and bonging and all of that. Finally now it's got the right speed. But that's why I usually just turn them off. But if they're not providing safety, again, down to 25, if they're not providing safety and you end up turning them off, then what's the point of having them in the first place? I feel like some brands get it right and they just weaken down the calibration or the sensitivity right down, so they're not annoying, but they still provide a bit of a guide about what's going on. Lane keep assist is a similar sort of thing. You know, some of them are very aggressive and they try to tug the car all over the place, when really they should just be correcting if you are getting pretty, you know, almost on the line, start to pull you back into line. This lane keep assist, though, it seems pretty good. It's not completely, you know, moving the wheel all over the place. I'll get pretty close to the line here, and yeah, it's not actually going off. Definitely very quiet and serene when you're driving along. You can hear your thoughts, which is sometimes nice, but you've still got good response and acceleration if you need it. Got a handy little blind spot window that comes up. Just disappeared when I hit the brake. It does have the kind of old BMW style of indicators. You've got to look a notch, but then to turn it off, it can be a bit tricky. Just takes a little bit of getting used to. Yeah, there's the blind spot camera that just comes and goes whenever it feels like it. That's a bit weird. As I said though, this is a kind of early production model. It's got a completely prototype interior. Things like that might be ironed out by the time they hit showrooms. Going up the hill here, I'll just slow down a bit. I've got a speed bump, we can slow right down. I'll give it some power to see how it feels. So now it's saying 35. Little bit of wheel spin there, or a bit of squirming of the tyres. I don't know where it's getting this information from. 35, where is it 35 anywhere in Sydney? It's a weird speed to show up. But then yeah, it's bing bong, keeps binging and bonging, telling me that I'm going over 35 when really it's 50. Now, in terms of ride quality, you're not going to notice any sort of drawbacks of a torsion beam rear end because you're just trundling about, and you know, not high speed sweeping bends or anything like that with bumps. You know, that's where torsion beam is going to be a bit of a weakness. You want independent control, but in the city it doesn't matter so much. It's still comfortable. Got a bit of a change in surface there. Yeah, it's fine. It's not crashing about. It feels very conventional. There's nothing, you know, you don't notice straight away, oh, this has a torsion beam rear end. That just feels totally normal. Again with the 25. Now obviously you can turn all this sort of stuff off. I get that. It's just, what's the point of fitting it if it's just so annoying that you have to turn it off every time you get in the car? Like, why not just calibrate it a bit better, so you don't have to immediately turn it off because it's so frustrating. That's the school zone going off there, even though it's not a school zone right now, so it can't distinguish when it is a school zone or not. So it's just going to keep buzzing thinking it's a school zone. But yeah, I've been driving for a little bit now and it's averaging 14.7 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is reasonably low, although I have been driving just in sort of urban environments like this at, you know, 40-50 kilometers an hour, which is ideal for an EV. It's once you get out onto the highway, that's when EVs are at their worst because there's no gearbox and it's just the motor spinning, you know, quite fast that chews into the battery. But even so, I think 14.7 is decent. Max charging is DC power is at 150 kilowatts, which is not the sort of class leading, but it is okay when you factor in the battery size. So 54 kilowatt hour battery, that's not going to take too long to charge up. I mean, if you had a 350 kilowatt charging capacity or capability, obviously that would charge up extremely quickly, but I think 150 kilowatts is okay because the battery is quite small. But if you are weighing up the options, comparing rivals, then yes, there are some out there that will charge at a faster rate. I've got a few different drive modes to choose from just to provide some versatility, eco, normal, sport and custom mode. You've also got one pedal driving, so that's where you just back off the accelerator and it will start to brake the vehicle or slow down the vehicle like you're putting the brakes on. But you've also got different adjustment levels for the standard regen as well. I've got it on strong at the moment. I'll just show you what I mean. Take my foot off the brake. It doesn't immediately jump on the regen, which is good. Gives it a second to sort of just adjust to make sure that's what you want to do. And then yeah, it's slowing me down while recharging the battery. You've also got an adaptive mode too, so it's able to determine what it needs depending on what sort of driving situation you're in. First impressions, yeah, I think this is a practical little car. I think it serves its purpose or its intended purposes, in that it's, yeah, very easy to drive, it's easy to see out of, quite spacious inside, and it seems to have a lot of technology, but some of it I think needs to be further calibrated, like some of the safety systems. The lane keep assist and all that, the driver monitoring camera seems to be pretty good because it hasn't gone off on me yet, even with a camera on top of my head. But the speed recognition system is definitely needs more calibration. But yeah, you can just turn this off pretty easily. MG Pilot, and you can turn off speed limit change, audible warning, and then you can turn off the recognition as well. And the other main attraction is that it's quite affordable. It's $31,990 drive away for the entry 43 kilowatt hour, and $34,990 for this top spec model. That's actually really good value for the amount of vehicle you're getting, for the range, even the performance. You know, a small petrol vehicle of this size is going to provide similar performance to this, whereas this doesn't use any petrol, so you don't have to worry about filling it up. You get the advantage of having some savings there. I'll put more information in the written review linked in the description of this video.